Welcome back everybody to another MOTOBOB video, and today I'm very happy to have this bike in the studio. It's the new 2024 Honda Africa Twin. Now to be fair, it is largely the same. It's the Africa Twin that we know and love, but I think for 2024 they've made some really nice little tweaks that make this bike a much better all-rounder. So look, let's head out for a ride and I'll tell you all about my key favourite features. Now look, the number one reason that I'd be considering buying one of these would be if I was thinking about buying an adventure bike to do more of the off-road side of things, and you know, looking for something that was very off-road biased. In fact, a year or two back now, it was myself and Tim, we went out to the Honda Adventure Experience down in Exmoor, and I was just so impressed with the bike and just how much you can do when you get the opportunity to push it a little bit more. I mean look, it's been designed to be like a big dirt bike. Just look at the chassis, and so it's no surprise when you watch some of the instructors doing the slightly more challenging stuff that it really is super capable. But what I will say as well is, you know, even in the hands of someone distinctly average like myself, it really does inspire a lot of confidence. It's not quite so massive as some of the other bigger capacity adventure bikes, but also just the way it handles, you know, it gives that confidence to point it at some sort of obstacle, and you know that the bike will carry you through it, you know, even if you're not an ex-Dakar champion. Thing is though, you know, you might expect to trade off a bit of road performance, but I absolutely thoroughly enjoy riding these Africa Twin 1100s on the road as well. A big part for me is the 1100 parallel twin with the 270-degree crank. It's just such a brilliant engine, bags of torque, low down, a lovely chugging sound to it as well. For 2024 they've made quite a few tweaks, so a higher compression ratio, they say, a new airbox design, a new exhaust design, different valve timing, different ECU settings, and the result is 7% more peak torque, which is pretty impressive. So I think it's 112 Newton meters, is it now? And I mean, for me that's definitely a good thing. Woo! Certainly not a slow bike, and it pulls so strong in the lower revs there, and I think that's, you know, that's what I really love about it, and they've given it even more of that. Peak power does stay the same in terms of that specific figure, but Honda do say that lowering the revs along with that extra torque, there's a better spread of power as well. Now it is a fairly tall bike. It does get the 21-inch front, the 18 at the rear, so this is never going to be, you know, sports bike levels of handling. But it's still very, very pleasant to ride, and really nice and comfy as well with this sort of spacious ergonomic. Then you've got the tech side of things. No massive changes again here, but I think it's a really solid package. You've got a 6-axis inertial measurement unit, so it gives you all of those advanced rider aids that you could ever need. Plenty of different riding modes to choose from, things like Tour, Urban, Gravel, off-road, a couple of user modes as well. Cruise control, which is a big one for me on an adventure bike where you might want to do a bit of touring and that sort of stuff as well. And then also, you know, this isn't the most visually stimulating layout for a TFT display, but you do have the option of Apple CarPlay and I think Android Auto as well. Now I haven't got it set up today because you need to get the phone mounted somewhere and pair your headset and all that stuff, and I'm just out for a quick spin. But when I have borrowed one in the past, I've set it up, and it's just so great to have access to your, you know, your favorite navigation apps, things like Kalamoto. You can have it nice and big there on the TFT display. And so if you're doing longer distances and you want access to your calls, music, media, navigation apps, and you don't want to use the built-in stuff, which I think is generally a bit more clunky than something like CarPlay, then yeah, it's a brilliant option to have, and again, amongst my favorite features. In fact, you don't find it on that many bikes, to be honest. Some of the big cruisers and tourers and that sort of bike quite frequently get it, but even in the adventure segment where it is very tech heavy, still not that common. So look, plenty to like, but what about these tweaks for 2024? Well, a big one for me is the move away from tube-type tyres to the much more convenient tubeless. You see, while it's still probably a great source of debate on many an adventure forum, ultimately, I reckon the majority of riders with a puncture on the roadside have a greater chance of fixing it with a quick plug than they would getting the wheel off to patch or swap an inner tube. That said, let me know which you'd pick down in the comments below and what your preference is. But for me, this is definitely a big plus, and those new rims with the spokes that lace to the edges look pretty sweet too. Now look, this is a great opportunity to give a massive shout out to today's video sponsor, and that's Metzeler tyres, who make the Karoos streets that you get fitted as standard on this 2024 Africa Twin. For me, they're a brilliant all-rounder with enough contact patch to feel reassuring on the road, yet plenty of tread and knobbliness to give them that bit of off-road ability. So a versatile tyre that's perfectly matched to the intended use of this bike, but more generally, I'd say Metzeler makes some of the best tyres in the business, and they've got something for pretty much all types of riding. From the super sticky Roadtecs and Sportecs, to the brilliant Roadtecs Sports Tourers, and then of course the Tourances and the Karoos, which offer a wide spectrum of capability for different types of adventure rider. So do check out the link down in the description below to find out more, and once again, a massive thanks to Metzeler for their support.
The other thing is this new 5-way adjustable windscreen, because on the previous generation standard Africa Twin, it was quite a low screen that was really focused on giving you good off-road visibility, I guess, as well as not getting in the way when you're in the standing position. Now there was, I believe, in the accessories catalogue, the option of a taller touring windscreen, but you'd basically have to, you know, bolt the old one off and then put that one on, and so you really had to choose between off-road or on-road. This is similar to what you'll find on the Adventure Sports. Now it is two-handed, so you can't really do it on the go like you can with some other adventure bikes, but still the ability to move it up and down depending on what sort of riding you're doing, and also the ability to dial it in terms of buffer in for your height, just makes it, as I say, a much better all-rounder, because effectively you've got a big improvement to one of the biggest comfort factors when it comes to distance riding and touring.
But I think the biggest enhancement, let's say, to this base Africa Twin for 2024 in terms of like versatility and all-rounderness has to be the option to spec it up with their electronic suspension system that I think is provided by Showa. Basically what it's doing is using the bike's speed, a stroke sensor on the suspension, and also the inertial measurement unit, which is going to give some sense of whether the bike is banked over or climbing or descending or, you know, anything like that. And basically with those inputs it can figure out in real time what the optimal amount of damping is on both the fork and shock to have the bike behave in the most desirable way. Now there are a few different settings for it, so there's one called mid, which I think is pretty much the default. There's a hard setting as well, which I believe is default if you use the touring riding mode, and that firms things up. So if you're using luggage or your 2-up or potentially both, then it's going to give you that extra support from the suspension so that the bike is still composed. There's a soft mode, which I think is default for the gravel riding mode, and they say that's more compliant for those generally less comfortable surfaces, so definitely want to look at if you're riding solo on, yeah, gravelly or broken roads. There's an off-road mode, and that basically increases the damping with stroke speed. So if there's a big hit, it'll give you instantly a lot more damping to try and resist it. And then also, I think it is a little bit firmer on the shock as well. And then there is a user mode, so you can choose from, I think, 24 levels of preload on the fork and shock, just to get the bike absolutely dialed to a specific scenario that isn't covered by one of those presets. So look, there's 2 levels of versatility to having something like this. And of course it is extra on top of the base model with regular mechanical suspension, but generally I think largely electronically adjustable semi-active suspension is a worthwhile upgrade, because yeah, in the sort of big picture you can go from sporty riding to 2-up riding to off-roading to, you know, full luggage touring setup without having to get the tools out. You know, you can just choose the appropriate mode and so it makes it very, very easy. So if you're a rider who does a lot of different types of riding, then this is a brilliant bike to choose, and that's something I'd be looking at speccing. But then you've also got that really short-term versatility as well, with the constant adjustment of the damping. So if you're going from smooth roads to broken roads or gravelly roads, from fast riding to slower, you know, low speed work, generally you're getting a better ride quality in each of those scenarios. And in my experience of riding plenty of Africa Twins with it, it has been an option for ages on the adventure sports as well. You know, I've always thought they've been super composed for such tall bikes. You do get a bit of anti-dive on the brakes and stuff like that. Generally really comfortable, and yeah, surprisingly good round corners and stuff like that. Love this engine. The other thing they've tweaked a little bit for 2024 is the styling. So you'll notice if you put pictures side by side, they haven't started from the ground up, but there are little sharpening up touches, you know, little creases that just look a bit more modern and chiseled. And I think that's the right call, because this for me is easily, you know, a strong candidate, let's say, for one of the best looking adventure bikes you can buy. And so why would you start again? It's got a great stance to it. Like I say, that big dirt bike look. The headlights are a little bit mean looking, which I think helps on a bike that should look a bit aggressive. And also they're very, very recognizable. You wouldn't want to change that, because if you see a Africa Twin coming down the road, you knew it straight away. And then yeah, I really like that they go bold with the color choices. I really would find it very, very difficult to choose anything else if I was buying one than this tricolor paint job. But I will say, even in the more stealthy black, or you know, the red finish as well, all of them great looking bikes. And I like that they've made them a bit punchy as well. Sometimes Honda can play it a little bit safe on the paint jobs, but stuff like this looks fantastic and shows what they can do. The big decision, if you've been looking to buy an Africa Twin, has always been whether to go for this base model or the Adventure Sports. Previously, this bike was much more dirt and off-road focused, whereas the Adventure Sports is a bigger adventure tourer with some extra creature comforts and features. But now, with the tubeless tyres, the 5-way adjustable windscreen, and the option of their electronic suspension package, the gap, I would argue, has become much closer and makes for an even more difficult buying decision. Now granted, individually they seem like pretty small changes, but I reckon they've made this bike a much better road bike without sacrificing anything that made it such a good off-roader. The Africa Twin has always been an excellent choice of adventure bike, and for me it just got even better, and I think of the two, this base model spec with the electronic suspension would now be my pick. As always though, I'd love to know yours, so do let me know down in the comments below. And if you like the look of this bike but perhaps fancy something much more road focused, then the NT1100 is a brilliant choice with the same engine and tech, just on a completely street bias chassis. And so I'll put my review on the screen now so you can give it a click and give it a watch in case you haven't already. And also hit subscribe if you've not already to see more of the latest motorcycle reviews like this right here on YouTube. Many thanks for watching today, and we'll catch you in the next video.